I recently went to trial and got a great verdict for my client. But if I'm being totally honest, the big win was being able to manage my anxiety. Not eliminate it, but manage it. Today, I'm going to share with you everything that I do, all my strategies to manage the anxiety that comes with being a trial lawyer. And frankly, I do wish more trial lawyers were transparent about the topics of mental health and anxiety, but I understand why it doesn't come up very often with trial lawyers, because the most successful ones, they are building a brand and an identity to where they're this superhero that's bulletproof, can't be hurt, and the last thing they want is for anybody to find out otherwise. And I think we see that and we idolize that as maybe less experienced trial lawyers, and that then makes us want to have a similar mindset to where it's fake it till you make it. And then we don't end up having the discussion that basically everyone, to some degree, minus maybe very few exceptions, are dealing with some levels of anxiety going into a trial or at trial. I also think there's maybe the rationale, or at least the logic, that, well, if the other side finds out that I deal with some anxiety about trial, then that will be used against me in this game of chicken while we're negotiating. Then all of a sudden offers for some reason start going down because it's like, yeah, that plaintiff lawyer is anxious about trial. That's just, in my mind, a little silly. I don't ever really have that fear. And I'd be open with talking to an adjuster or defense lawyer. It's like, yeah, I'm anxious about it, but gonna do it. We'll find out how it ends up playing out, and we'll see what the jury thinks. I don't think being anxious in that situation is going to discredit the value of the case. But that then takes me to an important distinction that probably needs to be made at this stage, which is that anxiety, in my opinion, is on a spectrum of sorts. Like, the one end of the spectrum of anxiety is maybe you just get some butterflies and it really doesn't move the needle one way or the other with your overall energy. But I think on the far end of the extreme with anxiety, I think it starts turning into more of avoidance. And that is going to be a bigger concern for people who fall in that category. Because if you're avoiding trial at all costs for whatever reason, then yeah, things are going to probably get pretty dark for you pretty quickly, because if you're negotiating a case, then I could see how it'd be extremely draining to always be bluffing, and every case being one big bluff to where you're just freaking out that somebody's going to call you on your bluff. You're going to lose this game of chicken. And as a result, you're having to potentially try and maybe lash out or attack the other side in order to beat them into submission to not call your bluff. It just seems draining. For me, my anxiety has never been that far on the spectrum of avoidance, but if you do fall in that category of avoidance, stick with me, because I think as I go through the strategies that I implement, there's definitely going to be portions in there that you can begin to consider implementing in order to hopefully get you out of avoidance and more into this anxious spectrum that 99% of trial lawyers are dealing with and trying to minimize. And for those that do not fall in the category of avoidance, but you are anxious to whatever degree like me, then what I'm going to share with you are the strategies that I implement on a regular basis in order to make sure that I'm going into trial as primed as possible. In fact, in order to make things even more concrete, I'm going to share with you my health data around the time of my most recent trial, so you can literally see the stress and anxiety that I was going through. Just keep in mind that my goal is always to manage the stress and manage the anxiety. There's just no way, and I've accepted this, there's just no way that I'm going to completely eliminate it. And the reason why I want to manage it is because if anxiety gets on top of me, then I end up showing up to that day one of trial feeling just energy zapped, drained, and defeated. If I have that going into trial, then I know the rest of the trial isn't going to be the ideal scenario for me. And so what I want to do is be firing on all cylinders. So if I manage my anxiety, what I know is that on the other side of it is going to be me being able to tap into a flow state so that I can be the best trial lawyer I can be. Let me give you a little bit of my life story without giving you my whole life story, just so you can maybe appreciate my journey on this spectrum for anxiety, because what I don't want to do is start giving you strategies and it seem callous if I haven't been aligned with where maybe you are on that anxious level. Because as I've gotten more experience, as I've gotten a healthier mindset, I've been able to get closer and closer to having, where you would ideally want to be on that spectrum. But in my early days, I don't feel like I was near the ballpark of being in that healthy amount of anxiousness, because the first case I ever tried about 10 years ago, I wasn't even a licensed lawyer. I had a temporary bar card as a law student. I had a case, it was a criminal case that was assigned to me to go try with very, very short notice. It could have been as little as yeah, we're going to try this tomorrow morning and I'm going to let you take lead on this, Jarrett. And immediate panic. And I remember my supervisor at the time was, Jarrett, if you show up tomorrow morning looking like you're ready and it's not like you've lost any sleep over the night, then I'm going to be concerned for you. And that just messed with my head. I was like, this is supposed to be a painful process? Am I supposed to not sleep? Am I supposed to not be taking care of myself for the rest of the night? So yeah, that got in my head. The fear of the whole thing got in my head, because I'm just thinking, if I bomb this jury trial, my first jury trial, and it doesn't go well, then my supervisor and my boss, they're not going to recommend me if I try and go and actually get employed as a licensed lawyer. And if I can't get a job, then I got these student loans that I can't pay. And then next thing I know, I'm going to be out on the street and it's not going to go well. Like life, I've failed life. This is literally the most important thing that has ever happened in mankind. I have to go win this trial. That was my mindset. That was my anxiety that just taken off to the moon. And I remember I probably got 2 hours of sleep, and I'm going to air quotes the word sleep there because I think it was just me laying in bed with my eyes forced closed for 2 hours before it was like, yeah, what am I doing? Like, this is just wasting time. And ultimately that turned to me waking up and just pacing in the apartment at the time I was renting. And then eventually made it to the courthouse, eventually made it into my office. And what did I do? I kept on pacing. It was what I did best, kept on sweating, getting clammy, and a lot of anxiousness. I remember just you have a legitimate panic attack, at least I did. And it just zapped all of my energy. And thank God this trial was only one day. I was able to just tap into the energy reserves, did great during the course of the trial to where, you look back and you're like, did I really lose that much sleep and have that much stress based off of what ended up happening? Was that worth it? Trial went well. And then it was cool, I got a win. And then around the office was a little bit of buzz about oh, Jarrett beat this seasoned trial lawyer as a law student with a temporary bar card. That's some cool stuff. And then I went and had another trial that went well. I got complimented by a judge who then told my superior some good things about me. And I'm stacking up wins, and my ego is getting bigger along with my head. And then the anxiety, guess what? That got worse as well, because then it was I've never lost, and I don't know what it's like to face a loss, and I don't know if I can handle a loss. And as a result, the nights before any type of big courtroom appearance, I'm just now starting to freak out a little bit, to where it's the hype, I don't know if this is sustainable. And my ego was just getting so wrapped up into things. And then I distinctly remember, if you fast forward a lot of time, it was my first civil trial. At this point, I had done criminal cases. I had done family law cases. I've had great results. And now it's my first civil trial. And this one was kind of thrown on to me last minute. It was a case that I didn't really build up. It was something that it was Jarrett, let's go see what you can do. and I hadn't experienced a loss before. And I remember just freaking out that morning of, not feeling prepared, especially because in law school, the mock trial cases were mostly civil cases. But in mock trial, you don't ask for money. In mock trial, you try and have your jury or judge determine negligence, and that's it. So this is going to be my first time asking total strangers to award money, and that was freaking me out. And plus my ego was like, I've never lost. Am I about to lose before I even left my apartment? And so I remember having a panic attack. I think I went and threw up before I left to the courthouse. And then I showed up to the courthouse just drained of energy. And that was my first loss. I ended up getting that first L and not liking it. And as a result, I told myself, this is not sustainable. This like energy suck before trial isn't something that is going to benefit me in the long term. And because my trials have overall been short at this point, there's no telling if I'm going to have longer trials down the road. And in those marathon types of trials, I'm not going to be able to be sharp for extended periods of time because this anxiety is just draining me. So as a result, I made it a mission to figure out, okay, what is going to be my long-term strategies and what's going to be my short-term strategies. In this video, I'm going to share both with you. We're going to break it down into those two sections. The long-term strategies are what I implement, and those are more of the good habits that are going to have me be in the right frame of mind at all times in case if anything drops in my lap that I need to immediately go to the courthouse and try. The short-term habits, I'm going to basically give you what I implemented in the most recent trial down to the day, down to the hour, down to the minute. And my goal here for you is take what you think is going to best serve you and implement it in order to slay that dragon of anxiety so you can show up as the best version of yourself. Now, to circle back a little bit, if you're more of the avoidant type, stick with me again, because I think some of these long-term strategies are going to help pull you out of that avoidant type. So you can start shifting that mindset of like, maybe I can do this. And then it's just a matter of optimizing that energy. All right, let's talk about the long-term strategies. And the core principle here really comes down to the saying that I love and adore, which is you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And so the goal with these long-term strategies is to put myself in a position to stay ready at all times. Some of this that I'm going to list off is foundational to where I've built a foundation and I've kind of moved on, but I'm going to talk about them here because again, I think some people who are watching this may need to build that foundation, and I want to make sure that I don't just make assumptions and skip over things that could provide value to some of the people watching this. What I have in front of me is a list of these long-term strategies. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. And I'm going to hit some pretty quickly. Others we're going to break down a little bit more so that you can figure out the reason why I implement these strategies and what you can potentially do in your situation. So the first foundational just piece that has been so critical to my entire career was that I was fully invested in doing as much mock trial and moot court in law school that I could do. So if you're a law student who's watching this and the idea of going and one day having a jury trial terrifies you, my biggest recommendation is go embarrass yourself in mock trial and moot court, because we've all done it. We've all embarrassed ourselves in mock trial and moot court to the point that you become a little callous to it. But most importantly, repetition starts building your framework that you can always fall back on, to where if you're thrown into a jury trial situation or you're thrown into a trial situation at all, whenever you are a practicing lawyer, those fundamental foundational tools and baselines that you're used to falling back on, those will be your North Star for what you need to do and implement. And frankly, it's great ego killer to go and lose in mock trial and moot court. I recommend, this was a little controversial in law school whenever I had a position where I had some influence back in the day, not a ton, but a little bit of influence on law students that were younger than me. But I would specifically go and tell law students to go lose. And it was like, what? We're supposed to win. We're supposed to, try and pad our resume as much as possible. I think in law school, especially with mock trial and moot court, there's this general recipe for success that if you stick with, it all sounds the same. And what you need to ultimately find is your voice and your style. So try new things and see if you can turn a weakness into a strength. And yes, that means risking losing, but go do it. I play basketball at least once a week on average. And there are times where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can score more with my left hand than my right hand. And as a right hand shooter, it puts me in a position to where it's like, okay, I may not be scoring as many points as I typically would score, but as I'm strengthening my left hand to where I'm basically can score with either one, I'm becoming an overall better basketball player. I'm just waiting for the Dallas Mavericks to give me a phone call. Hasn't come yet, but we'll see, especially at the rate they're going at this season. Okay, if you are watching this and you're like, Jared, I'm a lawyer, I'm not in law school. This whole mock trial moot court thing isn't going to happen with me. I disagree. I think that, frankly, there are lawyers out there that if I were to call them up and say, hey man, do you just want to do like a dry run on a mock trial? They would be totally down. If you are a plaintiff's lawyer and you want to be able to connect with other lawyers who just either need to sharpen their tool set or they need to get that exposure, then check out the free community that we have for plaintiff's lawyers. I'll slide a link that gets you there, but you can also go to lawventure.com/free. Again, it's a free community for plaintiff lawyers, and make a post. Say you're like wanting to connect with other plaintiff lawyers in order to get some reps in on opening or on closing, get some feedback in order to try and figure out what works or what doesn't work. I'm trying to build a community for everyone who's a plaintiff lawyer in order for us to be able to show up the best way we can. We just got to put our ego aside and be willing to look a little silly at times. That then takes me to the next bullet point, which again, I've done and I highly recommend, is go sit second chair on trials or third chair. Just go sit on a non-first chair at trial. And my recommendation is if you have mock trial experience and then you go and sit second chair or whatever chair beyond first, what you're going to be doing there is getting yourself in the mindset of like being able to step in or step up for certain pieces. Like for example, maybe you handle a direct, you handle a cross, and then you kind of dip your toes in a little bit more. And that for me was a situation where I was second chair on some trials, but I didn't say anything. And then my first trial was like, we're going to let you do everything. But the second chair experience, and there wasn't a lot of second chair experience, but even those were having me bite my lip a lot to where I was like, oh, I want to say this. I want to get in. And I started getting that energy of like, put me in, coach, put me in, I'm ready. And that only comes from seeing other lawyers in their element, figuring out what style is going to work or not work, kind of copying that style and slowly figuring out what version of that then fits you best. And then again, go and get your reps. Another thing that has actually been, I want to say, pretty pivotal for me is making Law Venture videos. Now, don't bounce, because I know you making a Law Venture video probably isn't going to be happening. But there's a method to this madness that I think a lot of lawyers should start implementing. I'm going to parallel what I'm ultimately going to say with a different situation. Here's what I mean. Mark Lanier, who is either one of the best, if not the best plaintiff lawyers of all time, he teaches Sunday school. And the thought and theory is that him every Sunday going and teaching Sunday school, where he has to do a PowerPoint presentation, deliver a message to an audience, is one of the most critical keys to his overall success, because he's been sharpening his speaking skills every single week. So yes, maybe he's not going to trial every single week, but he's certainly teaching Sunday school every single week. My version of teaching Sunday school is law venture. You see, whenever that loss happened, where I lost my first civil case, I lost my first jury trial case, that was that civil case, I realized that I hadn't been in the courtroom in a minute. And I realized I hadn't presented in a minute. And I felt rusty before the trial even started. And as a result, I got anxious because I'm like, I may be out of shape for this. And that led to the anxiety starting to increase, and that led to my energy being zapped in advance. And so I told myself, I think what I'm going to start doing is start trying to find ways to present, even though I don't really have a platform. So I started posting law venture videos on YouTube. Part of my reasoning for that is I do want to share the knowledge that I have at this point with people who aren't as far along in their journey as I am. The other part of it is I want to stay in tune with as much trial as I can, not get rusty on it, because this is going to force me to stay a little bit on my A game. And the third part of it was I want to make sure that I'm honing in my ability to speak to an audience. What I didn't anticipate is that speaking to a camera for a YouTube audience is really difficult. And it was a great tool for me to be able to get more comfortable with speaking to people, because right now I'm speaking to literally no one. I have no feedback loop. I can be saying probably the most confusing thing of all time. I have no idea if it's confusing you because I have no face to read. I could be saying something that you totally understand, and I have no idea if you totally understand it because I'm not getting a head nod of understanding. So sometimes as I'm presenting, I don't know if it makes sense or not. And so I have to, as a result, in that moment, make that determination of is this as hard hitting as I can be in a condensed way, in a condensed manner? And let's just see, and let's just post and get the feedback eventually when people finally maybe find this video. What that started doing was creating an experiment for me to where it's okay, what I don't want to do is script out my video to an unnecessary degree. And as a result, I'm just relying on a script, because if I were to go to trial, I'm not going to have a script. Most trials are, especially where I'm trying cases, the judges, they want to push those puppies through, and it is fast paced. It is go, go, go. There's not a lot of time to determine the evidence that was presented, sit back, write my closing argument, figure out what I want to say during that. Okay, this will probably work. And then basically have that script in the back of my mind as I'm telling or giving my closing argument. No, I'm not going to have that luxury. So I don't use scripts on these videos as a crutch. And oftentimes y'all let me know if I'm a little wordy. I get those in the comments. And sometimes I get those in the comments on videos that I posted 4 or 5 years ago. I'm like, look, I get it. But I'm hopefully improving on not doing that. And I just bite the bullet. If you want perspective, go back to my earliest videos. And not only will you see a different energy on the presentation, you're going to see that it's more chopped up because I couldn't speak for as long. And as a result, I would have to do it in sections because I didn't have the confidence of did this make sense or did that make sense? So it was short snippets. And then at times I'd get a little bit longer, but maybe a little bit wordy and a little bit more rambling, maybe like I am right now. But my recommendation for you is to find your Sunday school, find your law venture, and just practice the art of presentation so you can be better. Do I think I'm the best? Certainly not. All I know is I'm better than I was 5 or 6 years ago because I have been making and recording videos. There is nothing more sobering than watching yourself and realizing you have fillers that you're defaulting on, whether it's my most recent video, the last one that I posted, I noticed that my filler that I kept defaulting to because I was tired was and. I'd end the sentence with and in order to move on to the next sentence that was coming to my mind because it wasn't scripted. Those videos are so valuable with putting things in perspective. So for you, if you're a plaintiff's lawyer, or if you're a lawyer, it doesn't matter what kind of lawyer you are, maybe the idea that you need to start implementing is trying to have social reach. Start making reels, 90-second videos, and start talking about what you do on the daily. Start explaining the law to people who you would want to turn into potential clients. Or if you have a passion, if it's like you're very passionate about water, then start making content about water, even though it's totally unrelated to your law job, and start trying to connect with people on the topic of water. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, Mark Lanier, he's teaching Sunday school. He's not teaching law. He's not actively trying to convert people into clients. He's teaching on something he's passionate about, which is having a byproduct of making him a better speaker and advocate. So again, if there's something you're passionate about, make it known, talk about it, and get better at speaking and become the best advocate you can be. Okay, enough of that. Moving on to the next, in-person hearings. That has been very, very critical for me. So as y'all probably know watching this, or watching other Law Venture videos, I run a virtual law firm from the comfort of my home. And as a result, especially in today's world, I do have the luxury in a lot of situations to be able to have Zoom hearings. But sometimes I have defense lawyers that they really try and stick it to me by trying to say, well, I think this one should not be over Zoom. This one should be in person, because they see this as an opportunity to see if I'll get annoyed or rattle my cage for having to go to the courthouse. I don't bat an eye. Let's do it. Let's go to the courthouse. And what this does is this gets me familiar with the courthouse that I may be trying a case in, lets me figure out the electronic situation, which then allows me to figure out, okay, if we go to trial, how am I going to present the case? Is there an HDMI cord at counsel table? Okay, do I need an adapter if there's not? How many cords do I have? Do I need to bring a power strip in order to be able to plug in all the electronics? What is the jury going to look at? Are they looking at a TV or are they looking at a projector? Projector may have different lighting. TV may be able to clearly see. Do I want to rely on the projector or the TV? Where do I need to be walking in the courtroom? I want all of that figured out. And if I have the excuse of using a hearing to figure that out, then fine. But more importantly, I just want to get comfortable with going to the courthouse, get comfortable with going to the courtroom, be comfortable seeing the judge, because I know if I find myself having to go and try a case in front of a jury, I want there to be the least amount of firsts possible. Because if it's the first time at the courthouse, I'm going to have anxiety. If it's the first time going through security, I'm going to have anxiety. If it's the first time finding the courtroom, I'm going to have anxiety. If it's the first time being in front of this judge, I'm going to have anxiety. If it's the first time figuring out the electronics, whatever is beyond anxiety, I'm going to have. That will freak me out. I won't sleep if I don't know how the electronics situation is going to work. So all that to say, my long-term strategy for relieving a lot of that anxiety is going and having in-person hearings. A lot of times I'll pay the cost for the 30-minute flight from Dallas to Austin, and I won't bat an eye because I love Austin, and traveling there and spending a little bit of time there has never been a bad thing for me. In the same concept, the other strategy that I love implementing is watching trials on a regular basis, especially making time to do that. Early on, when I was a law student and I was a judicial intern, I was watching everything. I was just absorbing as much as I can and seeing all the great things that I would want to one day implement, but also seeing a lot of lawyers struggle and fail, and not judging as like, oh, they're a bad lawyer, of like, oh, okay, like there is a human element to this, to where if I come in and I'm not on my A game, then that's okay. Like it relieved some pressure of like, okay, I can do that. Like I can meet that standard. And then again, trying to keep my ego at play of like not trying to have the perfect game all the time. But seeing trials in person help humanize the overall trial experience, which relieves a lot of anxiety for me. And then, in fact, if I feel like I haven't been in a trial in a long time, I'll go even these days and go watch a trial in order to just have that additional exposure, maybe learn a few things here and there as well. There's also, and I've talked about this, I think, in another video. I can't even think about which one would be sliding right now. Maybe later if I can, I'll slide it. But there is the website CVN, Courtroom Video Network, I think is what it's called. I am subscribed to that. I do pay a monthly fee, and I probably should be watching more CVN videos because they do have a lot of great content. I've been busy, but all that to say, when I do have free time, my like Netflix and chill version is CVN and Courtroom Watch. And there are a lot of great lawyers that are on there. And I think what's cool about that is that the great lawyers who have great success, whenever you watch them in trial, humanizes them as well, to where you're like, oh, so they do stumble on words. Oh, this is a lot like what I would see during mock trial, or like the idea and the hype of them starts kind of dissipating down to something a little bit more reasonable. And you start realizing maybe some of the legend has been embellished a little bit. So I do recommend checking out courtroom videos whenever you can, to help, again, get more familiar with what other lawyers are doing, but also, and this could be me, hopefully not projecting on you, that it helps keep the ego in check of like what you're reasonably trying to achieve whenever you do eventually have your trial. Other things that I'll breeze through: seminars, trying to learn things as much as you can. Those are great. I'd rather know more and not less going into a trial. Books and online courses. I'll say this as well. There's an element of learning about trial strategies that just, it gives you more confidence if you know where the basis of the strategy is coming from. Early on in my career, especially that first civil case, one of the reasons why I was freaking out was I read books, and it was like, I know these strategies, but the books that I read didn't do a great job of why I should be doing these things. So I was just trusting these authors for these strategies and not really knowing if it would work or why. And that was making me anxious, versus now the research that I do and the reading that I do is more science-based at times. And maybe I'm not reading necessarily a law book, but I'm reading a psychology book that I can then take the studies and implement in law. And as a result, I also get more excited to maybe go try a case to implement a strategy that is supported by science to see if it does actually work. And that's excitement, is good energy, positive energy that feeds me instead of the anxiousness that takes away. Books, online courses, like I said. I also have Trial Ad Academy down below. That kind of gives you through the basics, A to Z on a trial. You can always check that out. A massive anxiety relief is, at this stage, especially being solo, is I build all my cases. So I build cases for trial. And one of the reasons why I haven't been to trial in a very long time, seems like forever, is because the paradox is that the more prepared for trial you are, the less likely you're actually going to go to trial, because insurance isn't going to want to take that case to trial because they're afraid of what you can do. Which means that the better you are at preparing for trial likely is going to result in you not going to trial very often, which is the situation I found myself in. So again, these long-term strategies are all about, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. So you just have to be disciplined and implement these strategies so that when that day eventually and inevitably does come, you're good to go. But it is a massive relief that when that day does inevitably come, the case you're taking to trial, you prepared since day one to be here. If you're the lawyer who's avoidant and you're trying to avoid trial at all costs, then you may not be building the case for trial, but you're building it for settlement. And if the case doesn't settle and you don't have what you need in order to go get a great result at trial, or you don't have what you need in order to last minute refer the case to a trial lawyer who ends up saying no, they don't want to take it, then yeah, you're going to be stressed out. Like the game of chicken that you'd be playing as an avoidant is going to just amplify everything. So build a case for trial, and the best way you're going to prepare for that is doing everything that I've said so far. Now, I'm going to pivot. Similar to me reading a book on psychology and implementing it in the legal world, these next two things I'm going to say are non-legal topics that I do benefit in my legal profession. First one is therapy. That has been a massive, massive long-term benefit for me because you can probably get a sense of this. A lot of my anxiety going into trial is ego-based, to where I, especially earlier in my career, but it still lingers. I want to go and impress. I want to have that positive feedback. I want that validation. So I have a lot of energy on executing that in order to get that feedback, to get that validation, which then makes me anxious about maybe not getting what I'm wanting. And therapy helps put that in perspective. And it also helps humanize the anxiousness, where my therapist will talk to me about, all these people in these professions who deal with anxiety and how normalized it is in certain situations and how it comes up and how he sees it. And then it's just like we're just talking about anxiety instead of it being this little hush hush whisper topic that plaintiff lawyers and trial lawyers don't want to talk about. So therapy has helped reframe priorities and goals, and one of the big reframing standpoints has been, what is my goal with a jury trial? Like, what am I trying to get out of it? If it's validation, then of course I'm going to be stressed. But if it's a different goal, then maybe I can reframe it into a healthier mindset. And that comes into the next topic. Another thing that my therapist has been great about is effectively acknowledging that your mind, while it's designed to help you, save you, prevent harm, it also is going to do that to your detriment at times. That's why there is anxiety. It's fight or flight. And your mind, at least my mind, wants to anticipate every single potential problem. And as a good lawyer, it's my job to do that. But then that then causes you to spiral, lose sleep, get your energy drained, and that creates problems as well. So you have to be able to have a good balance. And so going to therapy, talking about this with somebody has been fantastic for me. The next non-law related long-term strategy is the last one, and it's going to sound woo-woo. It's going to be something that you may knock as soon as you hear it, but stick with me. Yoga. Yes, I said it. I know. Here's the deal. I'm horrible at yoga. I played basketball my entire life. I have rolled and injured my ankles more times than I can count. My balance during yoga is like a newborn lamb or a newborn deer who just finished half a bottle of vodka. I struggle. And that's actually a really good thing for me. It's once a week, at least, I'll do yoga in order to go kind of embarrass myself. It's an ego check, and it helps put in perspective a lot of things that it's reframed my mindset in different ways. The big one is, because I'm not good at it, I don't go to yoga for the purpose of being good at yoga. I've accepted that I'm never going to be good at yoga. My mindset is, I need to figure out what my weakness is. And that shift has actually been pretty revolutionary for me, because I'll start doing, I'm going through my yoga poses, and at some point it's like, oh, my hamstrings are tight. Okay, note to self, like basketball, I really pushed myself. I need to start stretching my hamstrings a little bit more. And as a result, I need to lean into this weakness in order to make it a strength or to, make it stronger. And as a result, I go to yoga for the purpose of figuring out where the flaws are and then reframing my next week's strategy in order to help fix the flaws. One of the flaws, like I mentioned, my ankles. I've been trying to get my balance better. Okay, let's work on that. Not in order to be perfect, but in order to then move on to the next flaw and the next flaw, knowing that there's always going to be some flaw to find. And that, as we'll talk about when we talk about the short-term strategies, that relieved so much of the buildup of anxiety, and it allowed me to reframe the purpose of me going to a jury trial in a healthy way. Teasing that for now. The other parts of yoga that have caused a mental shift is because I'm trying to find in my body where the weakness is, where I'm needing to improve upon. There's this, and my therapist says, like, both can be true. There's this both can be true moment where I recognize this is my body that I can control, but I also recognize this is my body that I also can't control, right? I can control it to where I can try and do these poses, but I can't control the fact that I have a tight spot in my hamstrings or my calves are super locked up. Like, I can't control that. My body's responding in the way it's responding to me navigating life. And as a result, that's caused the mental shift that I didn't even know was going on. I had a hearing earlier this year and I felt anxious about it. But what was interesting was I caught myself saying, oh, my body's anxious today, instead of I am anxious today. And I noticed that I did that, and I brought that up to my therapist, and I said that was actually a pivotal moment for me, because typically when I feel anxious and I identify as anxious, then I get down on myself because it's like, I'm an anxious person. I'm weak. Like, this is such an identifying moment. I'm not where I want to be. My ego takes a hit versus my body is anxious. And so now I just need to navigate the fact that my body was anxious, and that separation and that distinction was no longer an identity, but it was just a situation that I was just having to navigate, like having sore hamstrings. And you go through whatever you need to go through in order to help strengthen it up. And then you move on and you kind of have that check at some point down the road. That mindset, again, well, I'm teasing it now, was a big shift for this upcoming trial, or the trial that I most recently had. Like I said, the long-term strategies are in order to stay ready so I don't have to get ready. The short-term strategies that I'm about to talk to you about, those are what I implemented on either a daily basis or in the moment in order to optimize my energy and to decrease anxiety as much as possible. This is going to be highly, highly specific to my situation, but I do want you to be tuned in to how meticulous and how intentional I was with everything leading up to trial. If you're go with the flow and not really anxious at all, this is going to seem like overkill. If you're super anxious and intentional with your energy, then you may need to find your version of what I'm about to show you. When I'm looking down, by the way, I have some bullet points that I'm going to touch on, but I also have my phone in front of me because my Whoop data is going to provide some perspective so you can see the actual stress and the effects of the anxiety leading up to trial. So let's do a little bit of a countdown. The trial was set to start on a Monday. And if we go back to the previous Wednesday, I had no idea on whether or not we were actually going to trial. Yes, you heard that correct. I had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I was 5 days away from potentially having to go to trial. And I didn't even know that I was going to go to trial because we were number 3 on the list for the trial order. In order to go to trial, you got to get bumped up to number 2, which means that 1 or 2 on that list was going to have to settle or reset for another time. So I'm in limbo. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in anticipation of a civil case being tried. And I don't know whether or not I need to put the time and energy into that buildup, that getting ready for trial phase. So Wednesday, I'm waiting, but I'm being intentional with my energy because my basketball nights are on Wednesday. And on basketball night, I tend to overexert myself. I can probably pop up some Whoop data showing that I typically max out my strain, and it's not smart. I have a hard time dialing it in on basketball nights. I knew that if I was going to potentially go to trial on Monday, I have to skip basketball, which is like my other form of therapy. But I wanted to be intentional with my energy because I knew that if I zapped my energy on Wednesday and then I had to start getting ready for trial on a Thursday, even if I didn't do anything physically, and I can't stress this enough, no pun intended, the mental strain is real. Your mental strain and your mental stress will have a physical toll on you. That's the number one thing I've learned wearing this Whoop and seeing my strain levels, that even on days where I'm not working out, if I'm putting in the thought energy, the mental energy into the day, it takes a toll. So I didn't want to have basketball on Wednesday zap me physically and then have basically no energy and it compounding from Thursday, Friday onward. Thursday afternoon, that's important to stress because I lost hours because of it, is when we find out that we just got bumped up from number 3 to number 2. The trial is on. That means I now have a few hours, or I guess not a few hours, maybe 7 hours on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So let's say 3 days and 7 hours to prepare for this trial. This takes me back to the long-term strategy. If you build a case ready for trial, it should be a lot easier. I'm not having to necessarily build the case from the ground up starting Thursday. I'm basically getting all of the exhibits ready. I'm getting the deposition videos ready. I'm getting all the pre-trial documents ready. I'm not trying to figure out what my case is going to be on Thursday. I've already built the identity of the case. Now I'm just putting together the presentation of the case. Very important distinction. Imagine the alternative. You haven't built the case for trial. It's now going to trial. You have 3 days, 7 hours in order to fill and build the identity of your case. No, thank you. So I spend the rest of Thursday focusing on trying to get all my pre-trial documents signed, sealed, and delivered. I'm also focused on trying to get a sense of what do I need to have ready because this trial is in Austin, I'm in Dallas. So what needs to be printed out, what needs to be bagged up, what needs to be going with me on my flight to Austin. A lot of thought is having to occur on Thursday in order to make sure that I don't show up to trial on Monday missing some critical piece of evidence or some tool in order to present my case. But for some reason, on Thursday, going into Friday, so that sleeping period, my recovery was actually pretty great. I got a 90% recovery, which I'll take that any day of the week. And I guess it didn't really hit me that I was about to go to trial, or maybe I was just kind of in the zone. So Friday, not too much stress and anxiety. I'm doing basically the same thing. I'm trying to figure out my exhibits. I'm trying to figure out the testimony that I want. I'm working with defense counsel on deposition designations. I believe we had a pre-trial hearing in order to talk about designations or to talk about the motion in limine, all those things. But now at this point, I think I'm having to look for flights in order to fly on Sunday to Austin in anticipation of the Monday hearing. I didn't work out. Again, I'm all about preserving energy at this point. And so Friday, full work day, but I still was able to get a good night's sleep the night before. Saturday is when things get real. I have a 49% recovery. And unfortunately, Whoop, I guess the data expired this far back, but I took a screenshot the next day. It says the same exact thing. This was the first time where my Whoop vitals showed that I had elevated skin temperature. And that didn't surprise me in the slightest, because I remember waking up that morning thinking like, oh, I am wide awake and I am clammy. Like my adrenaline started pumping because that night, all I had were dreams about potential trial. Earlier, I was talking about how your brain wants to protect you of all possible scenarios. That's what my brain does. And I just accept it for what it's going to do. And I just acknowledge that it's going to be difficult for me to try and wield it. So I just I let it do its thing, and I'm at peace with that. But I'm also very aware at this stage that, okay, now I'm showing physical signs of the stress, because now not only is my temperature elevated, but what comes with that is my resting heart rate has now increased, and what's called HRV, which is like the health indicator, has now decreased. The stress metrics are now showing up, right? It's now on the radar and on the scale. So my strategy at this point is, what's going to be the best way to preserve my energy? What do I need to do? And all I felt at this point was the anxious energy, that I thought, okay, I need to get rid of this anxious energy. And because last night, all I could think about was this trial, all I could think about are strategies, I am so locked in. I need to do something to take my mind off of it. So I went and did a yoga class. And as a result, the yoga class was able to distract me just for like an hour or so, just for a period of time, to where I wasn't thinking about trial, because I'm just thinking about surviving this yoga class that I'm sweating through. And that gave me a little bit of a mental break in the whole thing. It gave me enough time to just turn the brain off. And then of course, as soon as yoga's over, it turns back on. But that hour was pretty critical, and it's something to where I needed to just get the energy out and then start focusing on what I was going to do. And what I ended up doing that day was spending a lot of time at Office Max, I think it was, and printing out everything that I was going to fly with me down to the trial. And other than that, that was basically it. It was just paper prep and trial prep and making sure that I'm doing the work that I need to do. But I, at this point, am feeling the stress of, I'm having to leave my office space where all the information, tools, and everything that's accessible to me, go fly to a hotel where if I forget the one thing, I'm not going to have it. And if the one thing's missing, that's going to affect my strategy. So I'm starting to get anxious about just showing up to the hotel with everything in hand. Sunday, we're now one day from trial, and I do have a screenshot showing the higher temperature, the elevated skin temperature that my Whoop was registering for now over 24 hours. And again, my adrenaline's pumping, like I'm ready to go, and I'm practicing in my mind what my opening statement's going to be, what my closing argument's going to be. And I'm feeling the emotions as I'm doing that, which then gets me worked up, which then I guess has my adrenaline pumping, which is affecting my temperature, which is making me clammy and sweaty because my body's trying to like balance it out. There are physical signs of this anxiety is the point. And so on Sunday before my flight to Austin, I did a yoga class that was more predicated on breathing and focusing on just getting out of my mind, and instead of focusing on the physical. Like my yoga strain was half of what it was the day before, because the day before on Saturday was more of a physical focus. This was more on a breathing focus on Sunday. So basically, fly on Sunday to Austin. Everything survives, like everything I remembered to bring, I ended up bringing, and I set everything out at the hotel. And I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything, because if I am, I have enough time in the day to maybe go run to the store or go print something out at an office, but I was good to go. Some tension is being relieved, some anxiety is being relieved, and I'm feeling a little bit better about things, but I'm also realizing I have no PowerPoint presentation for my opening. I don't even know what I'm going to say in my opening because I don't know how the judge is going to rule on some discovery issues that are going to be super important that would determine what my opening is going to be. And I just accepted the fact that I'm not going to do a PowerPoint presentation for my opening. Instead, I'm going to rely on the IPVO and rely on the exhibits, and the exhibits that are pre-admitted, I'm just going to slide under my IPVO. I have a video on the IPVO that you can check out. That's Mark Lanier's secret weapon that I will swear by, especially after this trial and the compliments I got for using it. But that became the strategy. Okay, I'm not going to have a PowerPoint that I'm relying on, but I do want the video element of the IPVO. We're going to implement that. Cool. Let's go. So now that part of the prep on Sunday is done. And then I'm thinking, okay, what about a cross-examination? One of the best cross-examinations I've ever written, spoiler alert, didn't end up having to conduct that cross-examination, but it was so good written out. And again, I don't script in line by line, but I had concepts and I was like, oh man, if I get to be able to cross on this, it's going to go super well. That brought me a lot of peace. I was basically like, okay, I got all the paper, I got all the things, I got all the tools, I'm ready for opening, and I have an amazing cross that I'm ready to give. Yeah, I'm going to bed. Because at this point, I want to make sure that I'm focusing and preserving my energy, and we'll see how well I can sleep. Surprisingly, if we fast forward to the next day, Monday, it's game day. It is the first day of trial. And you would think that this is probably going to be the worst night's sleep out of all the other nights, but it actually was an 80% recovery. The sleep, even though it was less than 7 hours, I was out, I was snoozing, but then I ended up waking up with plenty of time to be able to kind of prepare for the upcoming day. But when I saw the 80% recovery, I was like, I actually feel pretty good. Like I feel like I have a good amount of energy and I'm not feeling drained. And a lot of that came from, again, the fact that I built the case for trial, but maybe more importantly, I knew that if I found myself in a position to where I didn't have something scripted out or I didn't have something I anticipated, I could fall back on the skill sets that I've acquired and sharpened from mock trial, moot court, previous courtroom experience, from seminars, from books. I was ready to start bringing all of that together as my fallback. And so I was finding confidence in that. And ultimately, when I woke up on Monday, on game day, I told myself, and this was the most important mental shift I could make, today I'm going to find out what my weaknesses are. Just like in yoga, when I have tight hamstrings, I'm going to go on day one of this trial and I'm going to see what I need to work on. My strengths are going to be obvious, but what do I need to work on? And now I'm curious. Now I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I can figure out what I need to work on, strengthen that, I may be pretty damn good. Like there's a positive spin there. If you strengthen your weaknesses, you're a pretty good trial lawyer. So I started getting excited about figuring out what those weaknesses would be. And because of that, my ego wasn't wrapped up into the usual goal that I had, especially earlier in my career, of like, oh, I need to go impress people. Oh, I need validation. I need people to think that I'm a great trial lawyer. And that mental shift was important. And then again, I'm still registering elevated body temperature on all these days. And it still popped up on Monday. And through therapy and because of yoga, I recognize, okay, I'm a little nervous, but it's more like my body's nervous, not an identity of like, I'm a nervous person. And so I didn't have a judgmental feel to that whenever I was going into Monday's preparation that morning. So here's what I did that morning. We're going to break it down in order to make sure that if you need to be intentional with your energy and your game plan, this may inspire some things. So I don't eat breakfast. If I do, it's like a banana or it's like a small protein bar of some sort. Keep it really light, because the last thing I want is to like upset my stomach, or if I, eat something and it makes me to where I'm like gurgly. I think that's a term. And I know I have to go first during jury selection. So I don't want to eat something and then during jury selection, I'm just like having to like burp or be gurgly. I don't think I've ever said that word out loud. So I don't really eat breakfast, and that's intentional. In life, I don't drink coffee, but I do drink like tea. And usually I have 2 cups of green tea every single day, but I don't drink anything with caffeine on trial day or on any big hearing day, because I don't have any problem ramping up my energy. I'll let fear and anxiety do that. I need to be as like baseline mellow as I can. So give me some chamomile to start the day on trial day, not caffeine. So I do that intentionally. And because through my whoop, and again, I don't drink coffee, but even with green tea, I recognize that caffeine increases heart rate, which then increases stress levels. And I don't want my stress levels to be higher than what they already are going into trial on day 1. So I avoid caffeine. I also did a little bit of like an ab push-up circuit, because I wanted to keep my ego in check, to where I did it until failure that morning. And that way I felt, you felt weak. Like there's, if you go until failure, then you realize, again, at least I realized, okay, I can tell my body to keep pushing up, but it's not going to do it anymore. Like, I control my body, but I don't. Remember earlier, the both can be true. And that helped put me in a mindset of that yoga mindset of like, again, I'm not going to judge myself for how this goes. I'm going to keep my ego at bay. And on top of it, I also got a workout in. And so I felt productive at the same time. So a lot of positivity going on. And this whole time, AirPods are in, and I have some pretty, I'd say like emotionally positive, but kind of mellow music. Like I don't have a lot of like bass or anything. I'm not looking for energy hits. I just want to be as baseline as possible. At any point in time, when I need to bring more energy, I can tap into that. What I don't want is to overexert myself unnecessarily by trying to get too pumped up. And that's why I don't listen to what I would maybe listen to before basketball in order to get a little psyched up. It's just different strategies, different implementation, because a trial compared to sports, I'm not trying to overpower somebody. I'm trying to be calm, cool, and collected in order to connect with an audience. And so my energy has to match their energy. And I know during jury selection, most likely these people are going to be like tired, bored, and confused. And so I don't want to come in just overwhelm them with energy. So again, I'm trying to keep it down. And I also know there are 3 points on day 1 of trial where I'm going to have a freak out moment. Not like full on panic attack, but I'm going to be hit with a wave of anxiousness that in my earlier days, I would try and fight like, oh, it's not happening. And then that would make me more anxious. But now it's like, just let it just wash through me. And I just accept it as what it is, because I now, through trial experience, know when those 3 points occur. You may be totally different, but it's worth figuring out if or when these occur, and just know when it happens. Oh, this is it. I knew this was going to happen. Here we are. Point number 1 for me, when I put on my tie. There's something about constricting the tie and being like, yep, I'm about to go to the courthouse, where that constriction for day 1 of trial, it's like, yeah, this is real. Like, we're about to do this. It washes over me. No judgment. Focus on my breathing. Got my chill music in. I'm mellow. Just let it wash. On to the next thing. Point number 2 is when I walk into the courthouse up to security. There's something about the anxious energy of security that, again, the anxiousness washes over me, because everyone's like trying to get in. You got people like, over here, do this, do that. You're taking orders. Everyone's grumpy in the morning, especially going through security. It hits you, especially because you see other people who are going to trial because they got all their briefcases and stuff. And you're like, oh, this is happening. So that's the second point that I always know. It hits me. The third isn't when I go into the courtroom. It's not when I start arguing pretrial matters. It's actually when the judge starts speaking to the jury for the first time right before I'm about to go up for jury selection. I get so antsy about what I'm about to say, and I know, and I'm face first to the jury, and they're all potentially looking at me while looking at the judge who's right behind me. And I just want to just start talking, and I want to start implementing my jury selection strategies, but I have to keep it poker faced and like contained until the judge lets me. And as a result, that energy just, again, it becomes just anxiety of like, okay, gotta go, can't go. And I just let it wash over me, and it probably comes out in sweat right before jury selection. But again, I've learned through experience that that's when it hits me. And once it hits me and washes through me, and I kind of accept it for what it is, and I hear my name, Mr. Stone, on behalf of plaintiff, you can proceed with jury selection, then I'm good. I know with anxiety, people are going to deal with it differently. But once that threshold has been crossed, I'm game faced. For my very first trial, I had all that freak out build up leading up to it. And then jury selection starts. I opened up with a little bit of a joke. It totally bombed. And I was like, in my mind, yeah, I'm going to make these people laugh. Like, I'm going to connect with them. Then I got competitive. And with this most recent trial, my competitive side, once it comes out, I'm focused. I'm more in a flow state. And I'm going to make these people as comfortable as possible. And that was, as soon as I was introduced, boom, I'm in it. Flow state, I'm in the moment. And from that point forward, I'm using that energy that I've been trying to preserve as much as possible to just do my thing during trial, be as present as I can, be in that flow state. And I didn't realize I was in it, because I guess that's the whole point of flow state. But after day one, the jury's excused. The insurance company's representative approaches my client and shakes her hand, introduces himself. I'm so-and-so on behalf of so-and-so insurance company. And he goes, I'm so sorry that things have gotten to this point. We never should have been here. And he basically apologized for forcing my client to trial. And he walks away, looks at me, kind of like gives me one of those nods of like, good day. And he walks out. And my client turns to me and she's like, does that ever happen? I was like, I've never heard of it happening. I haven't seen it. And she's like, man, today went really well, huh? And it hadn't crossed my mind. I was like, I guess it did. I haven't even taken the moment to like reflect on what's happening because I'm in the moment. This is flow state. So ultimately, everything that I've been implementing, long-term strategies, short-term strategies, that took time for me to know myself, to know what I needed to work on, to know where I needed to grow. And that led to me being as primed as I think I could be going into that trial. Getting to this point in my anxiety journey has been a long road. It's been a lot of trial and error, no pun intended, with figuring out the long-term and short-term strategies that work best for me. My hope here is that it inspires some thoughts, some strategies of your own that you can implement in order for you to show up to be the best version of yourself for your next trial. Now, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, or if you just want to say hi, leave that in the comment section down below. And with all that said, I'll see you in the next one.